Hello friends. Recently we purchased a new desk for Kate. Well, I say new, second hand. And actually the cash for our desk was kind of provided by a little miracle, but that's another story. And it is actually a story that I'm going to tell you today. So I would like to emphasize that at the start. This is not an experience. It's just a story. But when I went to purchase the desk, the imagination gets going. So this story is called Secondhand. I hope you enjoy it as I read it to you. Andy Maddox was brushing the street in front of his Coleraine shop. It was a bright sunny morning and already people were going about their business, and most called a greeting as they passed. Andy knew so many people in town and so many knew him, and he was respected for his reputation for fairness and kindness, though some found his views disturbing, as he really did treat all people the same. It was July the 8th, and as he'd walked to work he'd noticed even more flags out for the coming celebrations on July the 12th. He didn't really get involved in all that stuff, though most of his family did. Celebrating battles from 350 years ago, more or less. Not his thing. There were things about Andy that set him at a difference with his family and some of his neighbours. In Northern Ireland, religion is so important. It identifies who you are. Each religious group has got its own identity. The Roman Catholic people are mostly of the old Irish tradition, and for the most part they're nationalist in viewpoint, feeling that Britain shouldn't really have any rulership over any part of Ireland, including the 6 counties that are still ruled as part of the UK, any more than France should be ruled by Britain. They had not all supported the violent campaign against British rule, although some of them did, and others sought similar goals through political means. The Protestants were fragmented into many groups. Some were Church of Ireland, which was the local version of the Anglican Church. Presbyterians were high in number too, with quite hardline views on some things, and Free Presbyterian people who were even more so hardline on some things. There are also many evangelical groups of Baptist, Pentecostal and other denominations who set great store by the fact that they accepted Jesus as their personal saviour. But these Protestant people were mostly united in one thing. They wanted the 6 counties of Northern Ireland to remain under British rule. Well, Andy Maddox couldn't have cared less. As long as the sun shone some days and the peace continued and people kept buying and selling furniture, he would be happy. Respect everyone's religion, but practice your own, his father had often told him. But in his early teens in the 1960s, Andy had argued that he didn't know what his religion was. The idea that being Presbyterian had been good enough for his grandfather and his father and should be good enough for him had never made any sense. That church had encouraged his grandfather to fight in World War I, and then his father to fight in World War II, while its German counterpart had taught Protestant men to do the same for the Kaiser and later for Hitler. No, Andy argued, I didn't get a religion at birth because I think for myself. His father and he had fallen out over that often, but since he'd left home and gone to work in England as an 18-year-old, he'd never attended any church there, nor since his return to Northern Ireland, except it was for a wedding or a funeral. It wasn't that Andy didn't believe in God. In fact, he was very sure there was a God. He just couldn't see that it had anything to do with what he called the money-making and political meddling of the churches. Just a few days ago, he'd been in his favourite bar for a glass of Guinness and had joined in an argument with young Terry Allen about atheism and Bob Linley, who was arguing in favour of the influence of the Protestant churches in improving the life of the poor. Andy had sideswept them both. To old Bob, he'd said to go read about the greedy empire builders and the slave trade and see how the churches backed it all. But then to young Terry he said, I know there's a God. Every single time I buy a piece of furniture, be it at auction or privately, he stated, I examine it and see how it's been put together. Sometimes it's damaged and sometimes it needs varnish, paint or polish. Sometimes I recognise the maker and I may even be able to determine the age. Other times I don't. But one thing I know is that every wardrobe, sofa, table or lampstand and anything else that goes through my shop definitely had a designer, definitely had a maker. No man ever saw a tree fall over and turn into a table and 4 dining room chairs, did they? So how can you believe that the tree, the sun, the moon, the stars, atoms and cells have no designer and maker? They're far more complicated than the furniture I buy and sell. I don't think, young Terry, that any of the churches have any connection to God, but there sure has to be one. Andy kept brushing until the pavement was clean to his satisfaction. Then he stood leaning on his brush, watching the swifts as they wheeled and turned, screaming like children in a playground, sickle like wings against the blue sky. They always summed up the delight of summer for Andy. "Hi, Uncle Andy," his niece Jenny squeezed past him into the shop, and he was glad because now he could go to his workshop. He gave her a wink as he took the keys to the workshop from under the counter and asked her to bring him a coffee at 10:30. "Cheek of you," she said with a voice full of affection and fun. In the well-lit workshop, Andy examined carefully the old desk that he'd purchased the day before at an auction in Belfast. His snap decision to go up to £300 for it had been right. He'd seen comparable items to the Victorian mahogany bureau, which he had dated about 1850, on sale for £600, and in a lot worse condition than this one. He let down the hinged top and was pleased with how well it was made and how it had been looked after. He always took a few minutes to ponder an old piece of furniture. He wondered who'd sat at this desk in the 1880s when it was new. A banker? A politician? A school teacher? A clergyman? A Belfast businessman? Who knew? He reached down into the drawers and he slid open one. He sensed something was caught between the drawer and the runner. Taking the drawer out, 2 things fell. One was an envelope addressed to David Clinton with a Lurgan address, but there was nothing inside the envelope. He picked up the other paper object and found it was a little booklet. It looked religious, so it didn't interest him much, so he threw it to one side on his bench. He soon got to work polishing the desk, which he intended to sell privately to an antique dealer who came over the Irish Sea a few times a year from London. He knew he would get a better price that way, but he also knew it had to be really clean. It delighted him that the old desk had hardly a scratch. He often had music on as he worked here, so he didn't hear Jenny come in with his coffee, the room being filled with the sound of Bob Dylan singing Masters of War. He was startled when she pulled his cap down over his eyes and ran off laughing, which was a trick she'd been playing on him since she was 9 years old. He was pleased to see that she had also brought him a slice of his sister's home-baked chocolate cake, and he sat down to enjoy it with his drink. Then his eyes fell on the little booklet, and he picked the booklet up. It was a small booklet, and it was somewhat crumpled by the movement of the drawer it had been caught in. He looked at the cover, and it was on the subject of good news, and obviously had something to do with the Bible. He didn't believe all that stuff and nonsense, as he called it, about people who died floating off to heaven, and even more illogically he thought, to hell to be tortured forever. No, that was unscientific rubbish as far as Andy was concerned, and it alarmed him that people all around him actually believed in it. Yet he did, as we said, have a very strong belief in God as a creator, and the idea that Darwin came up with explained nothing to him. He really respected craftsmanship in furniture, architecture and pottery, so he reasoned, how could he not have the same respect in the design of a swan, a tree, or the beauty of even the bluebells in the woods in the Bishop's Palace garden around the coast near Downhill where he'd walked recently? He had long admired the skill of the joints in old furniture that had lasted over 100 years and worked as well now as they did then. So how could he not even more admiration for the ecosystems that supported all life on Earth and has for countless periods of time? He flicked through the booklet and his eyes landed on a page. It was about Adam and Eve, how they disobeyed God, and that led to death. But what caught his attention was the idea presented that they actually did die. That God told Adam that they were made from the dust and they would return to the dust. Well, whoever wrote this booklet didn't believe the dead people had a soul that floated off to some other place. The dead were dead. And it was just spreading Satan's lie that he told Eve to teach that the soul is immortal. that if she ate, she would not die. Andy was a little shocked. Not because it scared him that he had no hope of heavenly life. He didn't believe that anyway. No, the shock was that a religion was actually saying what he'd always known. Death was death. He leaned back on his chair as he enjoyed the cake and coffee. He pondered that. Surely the story of Adam and Eve couldn't be true, could it? And a creature called Satan, a spirit, responsible for all the badness? No, yet somehow he couldn't put the booklet down and starting at the front, he read it right through, all 32 pages. Some of it made instant sense. Some of it he wanted to argue with, and some parts confused him. But all of it did something unusual to Andy. It made him wonder if there could be a religion that did represent God. He didn't really understand the section about God being called Jehovah. It was this idea of the dead being dead that really made him think. And so the section on the resurrection also appealed to him. He bought up old furniture, and some of it was in a bad state, but he carefully got it back into condition. He recycled it, and it became of use again. So could God actually recycle people? He was standing looking out of the window at the sky, thinking about that, when Jenny touched his shoulder. It's so quiet in here, I thought you were asleep. No music, no noise. You okay, Uncle Andy? Yes, love, I'm just fine. Well, it's lunchtime. Are you coming? The pretty girl thought her uncle was unusually subdued. As they walked out of the door, he noticed that he'd hardly opened his box of cleaning materials. There was only polish on the bench. And he hadn't washed his hands. Always did that. She wondered what he'd been doing, because usually he worked very hard. He said that he was treating her today and they were going to Harold's coffee shop. Soon they were sitting enjoying decent food at an affordable price, as he always said when they ate there. He was still in a pensive mood and she was worrying about him. Jenny, love, he said as they sipped their after-food drink. You do believe in God, don't you? Yes, I do, but not all that stuff at church. Honestly, Uncle Andy, some of the most religious people there are so full of themselves, they make me sick. They make a song and a dance about being Christians, but they're full of bitterness and self-righteousness. They should stop going on about having accepted Jesus as their saviour and start checking to see if he's accepted them. That's well put, love. I agree with you. You know me, I don't judge people by religion, race, class. I judge them the same way as furniture, the quality. And I detest bigotry in all forms. Oh, me too. She paused. She looked into his soft green eyes and she said something she'd wanted to say before. You know, Uncle Andy, in matters of this kind, you have had more influence on me than anyone else in the family, the church, or school. Really, love? He was pleased. I don't think I've talked to you about it all that much. When you were a kid, your mother used to get mad with me if I started expressing how I feel about it all when you were around. I remember that. But you didn't have to say much. It's what you do. You're kind to everyone. You often lose out yourself by being kind to others, and you never gossip about people except when they've really annoyed you, like Jimmy Henderson, who you threw out and told never to come back when he made some very racist statements in the shop. I just started working for you then, and I really respected you for that. Well, Jenny, I honestly believe all men are equal, and women too. Stupid people like Henderson run down black people and then spend a fortune on holidays in the sunshine so as to tan their pale skin brown. How stupid is that? They both laughed. You're very serious today, though, Uncle Andy. What's happened? Something very interesting made me think, love. When we get back to the shop, I'm going to show it to you. Later at the shop, Andy gave his niece the booklet to read and told her it was more important than work, and that he would mind the shop while she read it because he wanted to know her opinion about it. Jenny sat on a comfy chair at the far end of the shop and was soon absorbed in reading the little booklet. She also found the section about the condition of the dead interesting. But it really excited her to think of the Almighty having a name, this making it more likely to her that humans could be close to him. Jehovah. Jehovah? Jehovah. She said it over to herself several times, and then did something she didn't often do. She prayed, and she would always remember this prayer. It was short and simple, but it was to change her life. Oh God, if your name is Jehovah, please let me know. I want to know you, please. I really want to. Later, Andy and Jenny looked at some points in the booklet and even got a Bible to check verses like Ezekiel 18:4, which in the King James Authorized Bible reads like this. Behold, all souls are mine. As the soul of the Father, so also the soul of the Son is mine. The soul that sinneth, it shall die. Jenny agreed with the words of her uncle. That verse proved that the Bible doesn't teach the idea of an immortal soul. They also read from the same Bible, Psalm 83:18, that men may know that thou whose name alone is Jehovah art the Most High over all the earth. And once more they had agreement that the context and the wording made it plain that Jehovah was the name of the God of the Bible. And he could see the point in Jenny's question. Why have they not been telling us? Why have they hidden it? It was Saturday morning when Jenny was going to the bank for her uncle when she saw people standing with cards covered in literature. She thought they were Jehovah's Witnesses, so she approached them. She explained what had happened, and the young witness girl said she wasn't sure of the booklet, but it certainly sounded like one of theirs. But her older companion knew this booklet well, and had used it often 3 or 4 decades before to share the Bible truths with others. They arranged to call at the shop on Tuesday morning, and soon Andy and Jenny were studying the Bible in the shop with the older lady and her husband. A year later, at a convention in Dublin, when they were both baptised and also interviewed on the platform, was a day of great joy to them. They explained how they coped with both family and community opposition and the joy they found now in sharing their faith with others. But it was the answer to the first question that Andy was asked in the interview that made all in the audience laugh with joy. So Andy, would you tell us how you first came into contact with the truth? Well, Rob, I got it second-hand, and it wasn't one of Jehovah's Witnesses that gave it to me, but an old desk. He went on to relate the story about the older version of the Good News booklet in the desk that he purchased. Andy never parted with that desk. Now he does all his Bible study sitting at it and prepares his public talks there, including the talk for the wedding of his niece, Jenny, to a fine young witness lad called Sam. And he's still got the shop, but he spends less time there now. Every item of furniture that he sells has somewhere hidden a tract, a magazine or a brochure, because he knows that finding such a thing can transform lives as it did for him and Jenny. How happy he is that he bought that desk, and that he didn't just toss that booklet in the waste bin. All his companions in the congregation and all of Jenny's friends are glad too, especially her husband. Truth is truth and cannot be changed, even if it comes second-hand. I'd like to emphasise again, that's not an experience, it's just a story. But we do know that Bible literature, truthful Bible literature, has great power to cause people to think. So it just kind of fits in with the idea of us getting literature or links to the website, electronic something into people's hands to make them think. There are people out there who are thinking and who want answers to their questions. And as Jehovah's Witnesses, it's your job and mine to do what we can to help them find the truth. What a grand time this is to be sharing the faith that we've got with the world in such turmoil and us with the good news. Nice to share a little story with you. Thanks for listening. You're very patient with me listening to my stories. Nice to talk to you all, and Kate sends her love to yours, and so do I. Love in abundance, my friends. Bye for now. Bye bye.